Okay. Wait, I need the candy buckets.
Oh.
Okay, before we get those, let's go back and keep recording.
I'm recording.
Yeah, take a picture. Take a picture with Frankie.
Jeez. You look at that. Don't get the fire too close. He's afraid of fire. As you know, the Dante's Drive-In was recently rebooted into being an adult show. So instead of drinking Voodoo this year, we're going to be drinking out of my awesome Monsterama pint glass. I'm representing the brand. I'm a company guy, okay? If any of you did not get a chance to check out, my cat wants in here. Get in here, Edgar. Come on in. Oh yeah. Now you're in for the Halloween special. Stephen King is over there, also my other cat. I did a Monsterama commercial with the Frankenstein monster, and it got me thinking for my Halloween special this year. I was like, do I want to do a Halloween series ranking? Do I want to do, like, I thought for a minute about covering Terrifier, because Terrifier 3, but Terrifier 3 happened to be a Christmas film, and it kind of fucked up the whole thing. And so then I was like, well, do I want to cover... I was going to do something about, like, all of my favorite Halloween specials. I was going to bring up my favorite Halloween treats. My absolute favorite of them all, Halloween Oreos. Like, these, they're just too iconic for me. Above all else, I was like, man, I'm in the spirit of green. I'm in the spirit of Frankenstein. I've been doing appearances as Frankenstein for my job at Monsterama, as well as my job at JCD and Hobby. So I was like, let's do something Frankenstein. My cat... Damn him! Son of a bitch! I want to do something with Frankenstein. At the end of the day, when I was like talking about like what are all my favorite Halloween things, like I'm like, when I think Halloween, what do I think of? Is it just Frankenstein? No, it's a lot of things. But I was like going to touch upon the Universal monsters, and since we covered Dracula. No, we didn't cover Dracula. We covered vampire movies. We did werewolf movies. Frankenstein is not one of those things, but he is a staple of Halloween. He is a Halloween decoration. I mean, look at this. What's this? Yeah, it's just like, he's fucking adorable, and we all love him. And yes, I know it's Frankenstein's monster. In fact, I know that more than any of you. I read the novel. It's on that shelf somewhere. I'm not going to go grab it. I have a painting in my room of all the fucking Universal monsters. Isn't that fucking badass? Yeah, okay, now I just fucked up my focus and everything. So the point is, I want to talk about the Frankenstein, the Universal horror Frankenstein movie franchise, and maybe next year we can talk about Hammer's Frankenstein franchise, which I also love. Today, like I said, we got off topic, but we've rebranded. Oh shit, I just knocked my cat over. We're an adult show now. We don't drink Voodoo. We're drinking fucking Samuel Adams Jack-O. Jack-O's cinnamon and nutmeg aromas recall memories of freshly baked pumpkin pie. It has the ideal balance of seasonal spices with a crisp, refreshing finish. Well, I'll be the judge of any of that. Oh my god. Oh. Perfectly filling the glass. That is fucking good. Holy shit. I'm in the Halloween spirit. Welcome to Dante's Drive-In. This is the Dante's Drive-In 2024 Halloween special. The Frankenstein monster Universal franchise. That's what we're going to talk about.
He ditches the glasses, folks. Frankenstein is legally blind.
In Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, he's blind.
Is he really?
Yeah, because they changed his brain in Ghost of Frankenstein.
Okay.
They put Igor's brain in his body, and his like blood doesn't. It's like not the same blood type or something, and then he goes blind, and that's why the monster walks like this.
Really? Yeah. I never knew they gave like some reason for that. What does that make him blind though?
Huh?
Like like his
His
blood
brain-
rejects the eye or something?
The Frankenstein monster's body rejects Igor's brain.
Okay.
And he's like, I can't see. What good is this body if I can't see? And then he like goes blind.
It accentuates your teeth.
Mm-hmm. I need to get like Frankenstein teeth almost.
I don't think people can see your teeth through the mask.
A little bit. When I go, like then it shows. Think that's enough?
Look at me like head on. Probably. If anything, just a little more on your bottom lip. But isn't that the lip that goes in the mask?
The top lip is normally covered by
Okay.
the mask.
Gotcha. Yeah, the bottom lip, there's like some pink showing there, you know what I'm saying? That's good. That's better. Yeah. It's more full.
I look like Zombo from the Munsters.
You are wearing the Munster shirt. It all comes together.
Typically with things like this, I would go about it by ranking them. These movies are so old and moldy, though, it feels weird to rank Universal Monster movies. I could maybe do a Universal Monsters, like, ranking of the monsters, but ranking the movies is difficult because they come with them older sensibilities, and I'm judging a movie on the curve of how it fares to movies we have nowadays, which is obviously not very fair. And I just don't want to rank them. I'd rather go through them in sequential order, which of course means we have to start with James Whale's original 1931, I think. I could just check the box. James Whale's original 1931 Frankenstein, released the same year as Dracula. And these two movies make a magnificent double feature. If you've never done it before, I highly recommend you doing it. I would also like to point out that the Universal Monster franchise is my favorite. My cat is going to fuck up the atmosphere in here. He's opening up the curtains. It's daytime out. It's not Halloween night. The Universal Monster film canon is, like, if I could pick all of those as my favorite movies, those are my favorite movies, okay? I can't do that, so my favorite movie is something else, but Universal Monsters are something that are very, very near and dear to me. And Frankenstein is arguably their best franchise in terms of, like, how many they were able to get out, how good they consistently were, and also in the sense of, like, the continuity between them bridges quite well. With Wolfman, they had Wolfman, and then right out the gate in his second movie, it's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. So they didn't really continue with it past that. Dracula, arguably, I mean, so for one, Dracula, as we know, is my favorite Universal monster. He's my favorite fictional character ever. He's my favorite horror icon. I love Dracula, okay? Dracula had one fucking movie, which was awesome, you know, for its time, absolutely. And then Dracula's Daughter is the sequel. And Dracula's Daughter, for all of the stuff we can say about how it's a landmark film and that it depicts lesbians and stuff, and first, I think, female vampire probably on screen if you don't count like as the main antagonist. Dracula's Daughter is boring, is basically what I'm trying to say. And Bela Lugosi's absence is sorely missed in that film. And then, like, Son of Dracula, like, I don't know. There really isn't a consistent string of Dracula movies that were like, and especially not ones with Bela Lugosi, which is the craziest thing. If in a perfect world we would have fucking 4 Bela Lugosi starring Dracula films, one after another, and they'd all be fucking awesome. That didn't happen. We got the one, okay? And then with Frankenstein, they made several, like I said. Even The Mummy has that first movie, but then all of the Mummy sequels are the ones that I actually enjoy watching because they actually have, like, a mummy lurking around strangling people. That first movie is so fucking boring. So, like, again, with Universal Monsters, ranking them doesn't seem fair. So, okay, either way, 1931, James Whale, Universal Studios brings us Frankenstein. What can be said about the original Frankenstein that has not already been said? I don't know. Jack Pierce's monster makeup is incredible. Boris Karloff as the monster is easily one of the most iconic images in all of horror fiction. Okay? To this day, you see tattoos of it, and you see it in Halloween stores, just like that stock photo of him with the fucking monster makeup is incredible. I think let's talk about the things I don't like about the movie, because pretty much there's very, very little I could say that I don't like. So I think it'd be quicker discussing it if I just say, like, the movie's incredible, it's required viewing, it's gothic horror at its finest, it's beautiful to look at even to this day, it's got lightning fast pacing, no pun intended, it's just fucking Awesome, okay? So what do I don't like about the movie? It irritated me as a child that the hunchback assistant is named Fritz and not Igor, because I always thought his name was Igor. And I think, you know, if you really wanted to make the movie even more iconic, if that guy had been called Igor and he was like much more hunchbackian, I think we'd be looking at a different kind of, I think we'd be like watching this movie more. I'd say, like, okay, here's the thing. Even though this movie's, like, known by everyone, it's alive, and all that kind of shit, and, like, the part where he goes and finds the little girl with the flowers is super iconic. There's a lot about this movie that, for whatever reason, people don't revisit it every Halloween. I find even more so a lot of people would watch Bride of Frankenstein over the original Frankenstein, when I believe that they're a package deal. And also, they both have such quick runtimes, if you just watch them both, it's basically like one mega movie. But we'll get into Bride of Frankenstein in a second. I think that basically people skip Frankenstein because it is just a very old movie. But I don't think that means that it's boring. I have heard a lot of people criticize James Whale's Frankenstein for not being accurate to the book. And that's something that has never bothered me. As a person who has read Frankenstein, I did read it after I obviously had become privy to, like, Frankenstein's monster from the films and stuff like that. I still just generally prefer, like, when you say Frankenstein's monster, I'm going to picture Boris Karloff in this movie. I'm not going to picture stringy hair and yellow skin and, you know, whatever the fuck. I just, like, yes, it's great that the book is a classic and shit, but I'm not so in love with that book that I'm like, fuck this movie. I just, like, I want... Both of them are classic in their own right, and this weird, like, revisionist history about, like, well, the movie changes a bunch. But there is a change that irritates the fuck out of me, and it's calling Dr. Frankenstein Henry Frankenstein. That's fucking dumb. I don't know why they do that. I think it has something to do with Universal being, like, Victor is kind of like a weird foreign-ish name, and at the time, I don't know, Germany. I don't know. Honestly... slamming the first half of that Jacko has made me delirious. I don't have a ton to say about Frankenstein. I think I more wanted to talk about the sequels. So just know that I love this movie. And I'm sorry that I gave such a terrible discussion about it. But basically, watch Frankenstein if you haven't already. If you have already, what the fuck else is there to discuss?
Frankenstein, give candy to JCD and hobby shoppers.
Candy? Don't mind if I do. Thank you.
Candy. Oh, okay.
I'm taking candy from strangers.
Thank you. Frankenstein's not a stranger.
Yeah, that's true.
He's a friend to all.
This is all for me? One. Take one. Cheers.
For me?
Yeah. You didn't want any.
Okay, so for our next beverage... Is this even a good idea, or am I gonna fucking ruin my Frankenstein video? Lakefront's pumpkin lager from, I believe, Minnesota. I could be wrong. A much brighter color than the previous one, honestly. I'm gonna try and pace myself a lot better because I feel like that first one ruined our Frankenstein discussion. But again, if you haven't seen Frankenstein, or you're coming to me for my opinion about it, you're a fucking idiot. That's good. It doesn't have as much of a cinnamon kind of like zing to it as Jacko does, but it's still very good. I enjoy it. Bride of Frankenstein. Now we're fucking cooking. It's so iconic. I'm pretty sure, isn't Maggie Gyllenhaal doing a movie called like The Bride, and like they're just focusing on the Bride of Frankenstein, which is so odd to me. But again, Bride of Frankenstein is somehow become just as iconic as the original monster from the 1931 film. And like that design, like the fucking streaks in the hair and shit like that, it's so fucking iconic, like that a lot of times you'll see them both together. But The Bride, as we all know, as horror fans and people who've seen Bride of Frankenstein know, she's barely in the movie. and really her role in it is what she represents to the monster, but she does not have any kind of agency really of her own. So making a Bride of Frankenstein movie that's just focused on the bride could be interesting for sure, but I just don't know what you're really going to do with it. The real interest for me in Bride of Frankenstein as a kid was not in that he gets a bride. The interest for me was that you get to see a lot more of the monster. From the get, this movie picks up right where the last film left off. The monster busts out of the fucking burning windmill, and he's got scars all over him that gradually heal throughout the movie, which I thought was really cool. And that's also another credit to probably the director and also Jack Pierce's monster makeup work. He probably had that idea. And I love the design of the charred monster. He gets to kill a lot more people in this movie, which I understand is not the point of Frankenstein, but it's, as a kid, is a lot more interesting. He gets to kill mobsters that come after him, angry mob, and pretty much the first half of this movie, he's just on a fucking spree, like a murder spree, because he's pissed off, and everyone's trying to fuck with him, and he just wants to be left alone. It even uses elements of the book that I feel like were sorely lacking from the original movie, which was things like The Bride, which a lot of people think is like an invention of Universal Studios. It's not. It's in the novel, which, of course, we all know. I'm just saying it so that it is a thing that people are like, oh, for the sequel, they brought in this female monster. That was a stroke of genius. It's like, well, Mary Shelley had that idea. Who also, Elsa Lancaster, I believe, is the actress that portrays the bride, and I think she also portrays Mary Shelley in this movie, and I would just like to bring this up. She's kind of hot. Especially for it being the time period with which it is. I always made a note of the fact that the girl in Creature from the Black Lagoon is so hot. Because, like, generally speaking, women from the 30s are ugly. I'm just being honest. I don't know, not many of them I'm like, oh, damn. You know what I mean? But Elsa Lancaster kind of has it going on in this movie. So, both as Mary Shelley and as the bride, but you don't really see a whole lot of her as bride. I loved all the murder spree stuff. I loved using elements from the book. The blind man sequence is just like, that's the Frankenstein monster. Misunderstood, desperate for a friend, you know, and a tragic scene that just continues pushing him closer and closer into monster status. It's just like, it's so fucking sick. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's so expertly done, and show that to anyone, even to this day, it's going to make them be like, ah, poor guy. Like, at minimum, at most, you're gonna be fucking bawling. You know what I mean? So Bride of Frankenstein, for all those things, is awesome. The other elements that I think it brings to the table that I do think are unique to it, that are genius, and I think even Del Toro is going to be utilizing in his Frankenstein movie, which I hope he doesn't disappoint me with that. Dr. Pretorius. Dr. Pretorius is one of the greatest villains in the Universal Studios canon, okay, in the Universal Monsters canon. As a mad doctor villain, I mean, honestly, even more so than Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, Pretorius, I think, is the inspiration for a lot of modern depictions of mad scientists in fiction. His little tiny people in jars thing is really cool. It seems kind of out of place, but it's cool. And the idea of like him toiling around with life and stuff. You pair that guy up with a monster, and he's promising him all these things with like a bride and stuff that you know he's only doing in his own interests, and that he'd be kind of like Peter Cushing's Frankenstein in, I think, The Curse of Frankenstein, Hammer's films, where he's like murdering people to create the monster. Pretorius doesn't do that we know of, but when we see him at the onset and he's like hanging out with a skull and like drinking to himself in like a cemetery, and then the monster just stumbles upon him like he didn't expect somebody to find him in that state. That guy's a weird fucking guy, and I love that fucking character. And he really does just kind of, I think, pull the movie together, because with Henry Frankenstein, as fucking stupid as that is, he has very much transferred into like protagonist status, but the monster is also a protagonist in this film, so you can't, like, there needs to be an antagonist, and Pretorius fills that role beautifully, I think. And the climax in which they actually bring the bride to life, I feel like I'm skipping over a lot, but really these movies are quite short, so it's, you know, they just kind of fly by. The climax in which they bring the bride to life is so magnificently done in terms of the atmosphere in the lab, the weather, sound effects, and also the score. That the Bride of Frankenstein, dun 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 dun. It's like wedding bells. It's so beautiful. And then when she rebukes the monster, it's like, and he has that realization. And this is what I'm talking about, where Boris Karloff is incredible as this character, where he's not just, like, that's what he's always depicted as. And that is what he's good at, you know, and that is the monster in a sense. He also does speak. And he can deliver lines that just cut through your heart, you know, like to your soul. When the monster is like, friend, in the fucking fire, after they take away the blind man from him and are beating the fuck out of him, you want to fucking curl in a ball and die. And at the end of the movie, when she screams as he's like just reaching out for love, and then he's like staring at the floor and he's pissed and he goes, she hate me. It's just like that frustration and that rejection, and he's just like, not even another thing like me will love me. I hate me, you know? And then he kills himself. It's fucking sad. It's really fucking sad. And it's like, it's a tale as old as time, you know? So it's a lot of times parodied a ton. I mean, not even a ton. It is parodied then and back and all around. I mean, we all know the Bride of Frankenstein story so well. But when you're seeing it in motion, the real thing, all those parodies, I really do feel like leave your mind. And you're like, if you go on this journey with the monster through the first movie and the second movie, you're there with him, and it's like watching The Matrix. Like, you've seen so many parodies of The Matrix. These lights are kind of like The Matrix, actually, now that I think about it. This could have been my Matrix review. If you're seeing it for the first time, though, like you've seen The Matrix parodies, but when you still watch The Matrix, you don't, like, laugh when Neo does the bullet timing thing. So I think this movie does just hold up so magnificently. And if you haven't seen it, it makes for perfect Halloween time viewing, perfect anytime viewing, but certainly it makes for one of the greatest double features of all time with its predecessor, Frankenstein, also by James Whale. Stupid.
Why?
It's so hot.
Oh.
Nobody's having any fun.
I think kids are enjoying it.
You don't think so? You think kids are?
I want to talk about Son of Frankenstein. Son of Frankenstein. I don't know if that is a James Whale picture, but look, I sound like an old-timey movie producer. Is that a James Whale picture? Frankenstein, 1931. The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935. And then Son of Frankenstein was 1939. I could be wrong. I don't think James Whale did this one, but I do know for a fact that Boris Karloff, this is his last outing as the Frankenstein monster. And it's weird because you'd think after Bride of Frankenstein is as iconic as it is, and Boris plays him in that movie, that more people would talk about Son of Frankenstein, but they really don't. And it's weird because Son of Frankenstein, in my humble opinion, is the perfect ending to the Boris Karloff Frankenstein trilogy. This fucking movie is a masterpiece. Do I like it more than Bride of Frankenstein? I don't know. I just know that I do love the movie. Bela Lugosi as Igor, with a Y, is, again, we don't have Dr. Pretorius no more. In the first movie, the monster was the villain. We need a new villain in this one. Igor is such a slimy, scary fucking bastard who can't die, apparently, because he's been shot and hung and electrocuted or whatever, and he's like this, and he's like, you're a monster. I know the Frankenstein monster. You know, and he's just like, and Bela Lugosi is obviously Dracula, but he disappears as Igor in this movie, and he pairs so well with the Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein's monster in this movie, I do think they kind of regress him a little bit from Bride, where he doesn't speak as much and he kind of goes back to being a grunting monster. But maybe there could be something said that, like, after his death in the second movie, he lost some stuff. Or maybe he's just super closed off now. But they definitely don't ignore the events of Bride. They just kind of are telling a different story. Basil Rathbone, best known for playing Sherlock Holmes as Dr. Frankenstein's son, is fucking incredible in this movie. I would go so far as to say, other than Bela Lugosi, he carries the movie. I love him infinitely more than the guy who portrayed Henry Frankenstein in the first two films. And I mean, his delivery and his punction is just so fucking on point the whole time. And this movie, the opening of it is incredible, but it's also a quite long movie. I don't recommend you watch this in succession with the other two films if you are turned off by black and white, you know, old moldy monster movies. Watch this movie on its own. It is its own thing, but it is telling the story of Basil Rathbone playing Frankenstein's son, who shows back up to the town in which has been ravaged by the Frankenstein monster, and it kind of does do some revisionist, you know, retroactive continuity with the first two films to insert Igor into the equation. And that might even be where the Igor, like, trope comes from, which is weird, because people don't talk about Son of Frankenstein that often. I think what it does really well is it's longer, and it's got a way darker atmosphere, and it deals honestly with darker subject matter. And I guess because people don't really know a ton about it, I think I want to kind of keep it, I don't want to go quite into it. I really want people to watch this movie. It has one of the most thrilling climaxes also out of any of the Frankenstein canon, with the whole sulfur pit thing. That's so fucking cool. It's so cool, dude. And I mean, like, it's just a good old-fashioned movie. And the fact that we got two amazing masterpieces that everyone knows about, but there's also a third one that is just as fucking good, if not in some ways better, that people don't talk about, I think is why I really wanted to talk about Frankenstein, because I'm just like, there's so much franchise here, but it's never really looked at in that sense. So, I don't know. Son of Frankenstein, it's awesome. If not for Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi, Basil Rathbone, absolutely. So that's 3 incredible performances to watch this movie for. Also, it's got the fucking cop with the wooden arm that they make fun of in fucking, Young Frankenstein. So if you've seen Young Frankenstein, you might not actually be able to watch Son of Frankenstein appropriately, because you're going to only be thinking about the jokes that they make in Son of Frankenstein. There is also a weird connection that I'd like to bring up, where Basil Rathbone has a child in this movie who's got curly, like, blondish hair. Basil Rathbone is portraying Dr. Frankenstein's son, which would mean that if his son would be Dr. Frankenstein's grandson. And if my memory serves me correctly, in the film Young Frankenstein, starring Gene Wilder, Gene Wilder is portraying Frankenstein's grandson. So that would mean that Young Frankenstein is not only canon to the Universal Monsters Frankenstein canon, but also that that character, Gene Wilder's character, is in Son of Frankenstein, and he interacts with the monster, and the only way that he would have not brought it up is because he's repressed it from his mind, because he's a very young child in this movie. It also emphasizes the monster's affection for children, because he himself is like a child. And I think that's something that they kind of get into a bit more in Ghost, which we're going to talk about right fucking now.
You ever seen this? Dude, this movie kicks ass. I'm serious, yes. It's Alien versus Ninja, okay? Aliens, they crash land on Earth, and they gotta fight ninjas, and this chick's in it, and she is so hot. I swear to God.
Alright, so Ghost of Frankenstein came out in 1942. And this is the first Frankenstein movie that, like, it still has its charms because it is a older movie that has a Frankenstein monster in it that was done by Universal Studios on their backlot with all of their sets and their actors. And so it's hard for me as a person who fucking fetishizes these kinds of movies to really say anything bad. But I will say this is the first Frankenstein movie where I was like, no. So, okay. Why this one? Because Igor comes back and he's just as great as ever. The monster this time is being portrayed by Lon Chaney. And this is something Universal does that has always irritated the fuck out of me. And they're like, you played Dracula? Well, then you played a monster, which means you're good at playing monsters, which means you'll be able to play the Frankenstein monster. That's what they did with Bela Lugosi in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Bela Lugosi plays the monster in that movie. I'm sorry, as a dude who loves Frankenstein and loves Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula, and just really, I love Bela Lugosi, flaws and all, like, he's not the dude to play the Frankenstein monster.
Fuck you! Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit!
So it's weird to me when they had that happen, okay? Lon Chaney Jr., his father, of course, was Lon Chaney Sr., who played the Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, London After Midnight guy, Professor Burke, okay? So that guy, the man of fucking 100 faces or whatever, has a son, Lon Chaney Jr., who is amazing, incredible at playing the Wolfman. He ain't supposed to be Dracula, but he was. He is not really supposed to be the Frankenstein monster, yet he was. He's pretty good as the Mummy, okay? I'll give him that. But I don't like Lon Chaney as the monster. I wish it was Boris Karloff. But Karloff was like, I'm an actor. No. I wish I could go back in time and show him how beloved the Frankenstein monster is and his portrayal is, and be like, look, dude, this is all you're going to be remembered for. Like, yes, you were the voice, the narrator for The Grinch, okay? And yes, you were in some other stuff. But your legacy is the Frankenstein monster, and you could have made it your own if you just continued playing that character. Imagine if he had played him every time. That would have been nuts, okay? And we'll eventually get to an actor who I really like playing the Frankenstein monster. Actually, several, okay? But Boris Karloff didn't want to be the Frankenstein monster again, so Lon Chaney Jr. stepped in to fill the stacked up boots, okay? And I think he does fine, but it is a noticeable, like, okay, now we're doing this thing. We're not doing the stuff that you had been seeing. Now the monster walks like this. And now the monster is just, and that's fine. I mean, like, I like that. That's why I don't hate Ghost of Frankenstein. What I don't like about Ghost of Frankenstein is that the ending is bullshit. Pretty much the ending is bullshit. I don't like that. Igor wants to put his brain in the monster's body, and they end up going through with that, and he wants to do this so he can take over the world. Brother, the Frankenstein monster is apprehended in every movie by, like, a group of, like, 50 men, okay? So he's like, I have the strength of 50 men! And it's like, yeah, that's not enough to take over the world, Buster, okay? So, silly plan aside, that's what he wants to do. He ends up blowing up the lab and burning to death. And then, I guess from this point on, Igor's brain is in that monster's body, but they don't really bring it up. So it's just kind of like they just ignored this movie. I think where this movie shines is that you get a lot of the monster walking around, chasing people like this, killing people like this, And there's a cute scene with a little girl in a balloon, and she's like, can you get my balloon? And he goes up and does it, and then the town is all like, fuck the monster, he's a fucking asshole. And the monster's all, I'm just trying to be nice, And there's some classic Frankenstein stuff in here. I would say, though, that this is the first one that you can skip. If you don't live and breathe the Frankenstein monster from Universal's movies canon, then this isn't required viewing. But it is fun. If not, it is the first one. Ugh, I hate to use this word. It is the first one that is disposable. Fuck! It sucks, doesn't it?
Go. Yep. 1, 2, 3,
That's crazy.
4, 5, 6, 7.
It's
8.
so hard without my toes.
Without your toes.
Because I can't bend my toes. So I'm basically just like...
Did Ghost. I have already talked about Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. So, if I'm being honest, I'm not going to do it again. We've talked about it. You know how I feel about it. You know how much I fucking adore it. Even with Bela Lugosi playing the monster. I've already talked about it. So we're going to go right past it into one of my favorites of the Frankenstein canon. And that is House of Frankenstein. House of Frankenstein is a fucking party. This movie is the first, well, okay, so actually it's not the first. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman was the first of the Monster Rally films, which is where Universal would combine monsters into one movie. House of Frankenstein, they combine the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, once again, Dracula, the Mad Doctor, and the Hunchback. Okay? Those 5. And they do it again several times over. But basically, Frankenstein, or House of Frankenstein, you get Boris Karloff playing Dr. Neiman, I think is his name. And he's a great character. And he's on the run to do something with Frankenstein's monster. And this quest that he's on takes him along a journey where he encounters Dracula in the first section of the movie. Played, honestly, pretty well by John Carradine. Who then gets dispatched, which ends the Dracula portion of the movie. And then we go into the Wolfman portion of the movie, where we get a lot of great stuff. Honestly, another great entry in the Wolfman sub-series happens in the middle of House of Frankenstein. And then we wrap the whole thing up after Wolfman is dispatched with a really fun scene with the Frankenstein monster. So while it says House of Frankenstein in the title, the Frankenstein monster has a very, very small role in the movie. But it is, here's what's interesting about it. You'd think if we were combining these monsters together, like the modern sensibility is like, okay, well, it's because we want to see like Dracula interact with the Frankenstein monster and do all these things. And that wasn't how they thought back then. They were thinking like, no, we're going to make a movie where we're basically selling them a movie ticket to watch 3 movies. A Dracula movie, a Wolfman movie, and then a Frankenstein movie. And they're all going to happen in one continuity and with one lead character, which would be Dr. Neiman, who's the villain and also protagonist-ish sort of thing of the movie. And you're going to see gypsies, which they say a lot in the movie. I understand that it's technically a slur, so the Romani people, but they're called gypsies in the fucking movies. You see a lot of gypsy people, you see hunchback people, you see fucking mad scientists, like all these like staples of Universal Monsters canon, but it's all just stuffed into one tight hour and 10-minute runtime. And like I said, you get a Dracula movie, a Wolfman movie, and then a Frankenstein movie. I think the Wolfman portion is maybe the strongest because, again, the Wolfman is the only one of these monsters that has only ever been consistently portrayed by one person, and that is Lon Chaney Jr. And he's so fucking good that it's like, he just every single time brings a certain, like, gravitas and importance to that character. And you feel a continuity between them. It doesn't all of a sudden turn into someone else. John Carradine feels like a different Dracula, even though he's supposed to, I guess, technically be Bela Lugosi's Dracula. So, while as a kid I might have been disappointed that the monsters don't really interact with each other a ton, that would later be rectified with things like Monster Squad and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Looking at it modern day now, I'm like, this is such a fun fucking movie because you get to see all these things, you know, in one movie. And I think watching it like that, where you're like, here's this section, that section, and now this section, but they're all like strung together by this mad doctor that's interacting with said monster. that makes it very fun to watch, and I do love that climax. Before it pisses away any of its momentum, it just ends, and it's awesome. It's so fun, and it flies by. Truly, it does. And there's interesting characters throughout. There's interesting romance throughout. If you're just into this kind of thing, House of Frankenstein, I think, is a dramatic improvement over Ghost of Frankenstein, and I also think it is... I don't say it's as good as Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, because I really like that movie, but it is very good.
1,500 Sabrina Carpenter songs, 845 Olivia Rodrigo songs, and then we slowly climb down.
Gracie Adams, Ariana Grande. Not one.
Deep sleep.
But Chaperone been on here, so
No,
you're a fake fan.
she's probably down here somewhere. There she is. 60 scraps.
Okay, but for real, you're like this sucks. This is trash.
There's Charlie.
43.
There you go.
Next up is maybe the weakest film, maybe, but I did just watch it last night, and I had more fun with it than I had ever had with it, and that is House of Dracula. I'm only discussing this, technically this should be in the Dracula discussion, but Dracula once again plays such a minuscule part of this movie in the same way he did with House of Frankenstein, and the monster plays about the same level of importance in it, that when we eventually do a Dracula thing, we'll talk about that. Right now we're talking about Frankenstein, so this movie counts as part of the Frankenstein canon. This movie is a fucking mess. This movie has a lot of stock footage of older movies. This movie has a lot of reuse. This movie has a lot of reuse even from House of Frankenstein, which we just watched. It is a mad scientist that is the connective tissue between three separate plots that don't really connect with each other. One being a Dracula movie, one being a Wolfman movie, and one being a Frankenstein's monster movie. And even with all those flaws, I think Dr. Edelman is such a fun villain to hang out with. If you're really into mad scientist stuff, he's maybe the best that we've gotten. I think better than Neiman. I want to say it's Neiman. He's not better than Igor, but he's really good. I think what would have made this movie like fucking incredible is if they had done what they were originally going to do, which was going to be Dracula versus the Wolfman. That was literally what it was fucking called. And it was going to have Dracula being played by Bela Lugosi once again, and Lon Chaney playing the Wolfman. That would have been fucking awesome. Instead, they pivoted and they basically repeated all of the stuff that worked about House of Frankenstein into a movie that doesn't work nearly as well. And that is unfortunate. I think that it is the weakest film in the Frankenstein canon. I would much rather watch Ghost of Frankenstein over this movie, but it does have its merits. It does. It has great atmosphere. Dr. Edelman is fun to hang out with. He's a crazy mad scientist guy who transfuses werewolf and vampire blood or something into his body and becomes a serial killer, which is cool. But he's mainly like the main villain, and the monsters are all kind of supporting his thing. But what is interesting is that it gives Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman, a happy ending, which is then later undone, but it is a happy ending, which is rare to see for that character, because we've seen him, I guess, 3 times now be like, I want to die! Kill me! And then someone kill him, you know? And so it's interesting to see him get a happy ending this time. And I'm happy to see it. I think House of Dracula I appreciate, but it is another one that I'm like, this is not required viewing. It's weak, a lot of reused stuff, could have been better. What they had on paper with Dracula versus Wolfman, even if it didn't feature a Dracula and Wolfman fight, which is bizarre, but again, it's just an old movie where they didn't have modern... They hadn't seen Freddy versus Jason yet. They didn't know any better. It is weird, but that is what they had done. House of Dracula is a weak entry. Truly it is. And it's difficult for me to admit, because I love these movies. But I will watch this movie. It's comfort food. This is one you can skip, though. Let's move on to one of my absolute favorites of the entire thing. Also happens to be the last movie.
Eddie Monster. Eddie Monster. I don't know.
So we went out on a high note. Let's talk about Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. So For the last few movies, the Frankenstein monster has been portrayed by Glenn Strange. I actually really like Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. He doesn't get a lot to do in House. He doesn't get a lot to do in either House movie, actually, House of Dracula or House of Frankenstein. But in this movie, he kind of does. And he portrays the quintessential, like, Halloween decoration version of the Frankenstein monster. He's looks like the Frankenstein monster. He's a big, giant guy. He's got the neck bolts. He walks around like this. And he kind of always has this sort of, like, dopey expression on his face. And he's not Boris Karloff. He ain't even Lon Chaney. But he has this fun comfort food vibe that makes me love the Frankenstein monster as much as I do. And it just makes me think about my childhood and how Halloween used to make me feel as a kid. And that's why I loved him as the Frankenstein monster. And this movie, you get to see the most of him being the Frankenstein monster. Also, Bud Abbott and Lou Costello are funny for their time. I think their humor doesn't play as well nowadays, but there's enough of their humor that still works, like their witty banter back and forth, and just kind of like their slapstick sort of shtick in this movie that I think it works enough. So, if you take away, though, the comedy aspects of this movie, the horror aspects are played straight. Dracula, once again played by Bela Lugosi, which is like, that's the craziest thing to me. He played, I think I said this before in the vampire movies thing, but like, he played him in Dracula, he plays him again in this movie, no other time. He played him on stage, which doesn't really count, and he's played vampires other times. He even played a vampire in the remake of London After Midnight, but he doesn't portray Dracula, except on screen in a movie, except in original Dracula movie, and then this movie. And I think he's honestly a little too old at this point, but it still is nice that he got to do it more than once. Because, I mean, he fucking is Dracula. Like, it's for real. He is the definitive fucking Dracula. So, I love that he got to be a part of this. I love that the Frankenstein monster could be part of this. I love that fucking Lon Chaney Jr. reprised the Wolfman one more time, and that he got some fun stuff to do. This movie, in the same... I said House of Frankenstein's a party. It's the last of the, like... I guess House of Dracula would be the last of the, like, serious Frankenstein movies. But Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein gave us closure, which is rare back then. For, like, something to get closure, like... If they just cut it off after House of Dracula, that's it. Okay? We never got to see the Dracula fight the Wolfman. We never got to see Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster go around and do a bunch of Frankenstein stuff. We didn't really ever get to see Dracula interact with the Frankenstein monster for a long period of time. We never really got to see the Wolfman interact with fucking Abbott and Costello. Except in this movie, we got all those things. Dracula fights the Wolfman, and it's fucking awesome. And it's Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, so we got closure on that also. We get to see a lot of Glenn Strange as the monster roaming around, you know, chasing people. We get to see a lot of the Wolfman again. And I don't know, it's just, again, it's like, it's closure. That's how I would describe it. And it's fun, and it's Halloween at its finest. And it even ends off with a really fun cameo from the Invisible Man. So, voiced by Vincent motherfucking Price. So I just, like, you can never ever make me hate Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And even, I think that there is something to be said about how inspirational this movie was to me, because I've always wanted to do horror comedy, and that's something I've always been very passionate about. And I think the way that this movie nailed it, because it said, you make your main characters funny, which makes us like them, and then you make your villains serious, which makes us scared of them. And that's how you do it properly. And I just think that we were spoiled with this movie, and that this movie is so much fucking fun that, I mean, really, it's like Monster Squad before Monster Squad. It's a shame that Universal never really did put the Mummy in here, or put the Invisible Man in for a long period of time, or even, the Gill Man. But the Gill Man hadn't even showed up at this point. That's something that's also kind of weird. But, like, Monster Squad was our true fucking closure to this whole thing, but it would have been fucking awesome to see Universal tackle that. You know what I mean? Get Bela Lugosi to play Dracula, get Lon Chaney obviously to play the Wolfman, you get Glenn Strange to be Frankenstein, it doesn't have to be Boris Karloff, you get somebody to be the Mummy, could really be fucking anybody, because he's just, you know, that. And then you throw the Invisible Man in as Vincent Price, and I mean, like, fuck, we'd be cooking with gas.
Frankenstein, Halloween candy, tier list. Milky Way. Reese's, second. Kit Kat. Kit Kat is better than Reese's. Okay. Twix. Twix is bottom. Twix, yeah. No like Twix. Snickers. Snickers is the best Halloween candy.
We finished this whole thing with 2 beers. Thank you guys so much for watching the Dante's Drive-In Halloween special. I have been going through some really crazy shit lately. Mentally. I pretty much lost my ever-loving fucking mind. Okay? And for a moment there, I thought about deleting all of Dante Graves' show. And no one really talked me out of it, and that kind of made it worse. But then I realized at the end of the day, and this is kind of why I wanted to talk about Frankenstein, horror movies and monster movies and Frankenstein, like things like this, are my comfort food. And they're my purpose. It's like, I just fucking love this shit so much. I love that I love it, you know, and that is who I am. And so I have movies that I'm working on. They're taking a little bit longer than expected. Dante Graves' show served me well, but I've grown out of it, and I want to do other things. And I hope you guys are around to see those things. And right now, I'm on a little bit of a buzz from the back-to-back chugging of both of these pumpkin beers. But I love you guys, and I love that you've continued to watch the Dante Graves show. I see Dante's Drive-In as an extension of that, and I will continue to do Dante's Drive-In. So I will always be here in some way. You know what I mean? I appreciate that you guys stuck around. I have the Munsters playing on the TV here because it embodies what I'm talking about in the sense that, like, horror movies are my comfort food. You know, I can put on Texas Chainsaw Massacre and fall asleep to it and wake up and feel, like, amazing. Like, I'll have the best sleep of my life. Because I'm just, like, I just love this shit so much. And every now and again, it loves me back. And that's why I keep doing it. And so I'm basically just saying this because I know it's been a rough patch where I haven't really uploaded a ton. And I say this a lot too, but it's, again, I think this is just the pace at which I work, you know? And sooner or later, you guys are going to get hit with a movie that you guys are like, wow, that was fucking really goddamn good. You know what I mean? And you guys are going to be rewarded for sticking around. And I intend to keep that fucking promise because I'm never going to stop making fucking movies, you know? I'm never going to stop getting up here drinking beer and talking about movies because I love them too much. And I love you guys. I do. So, basically, thank you guys. I hope you have a happy Halloween. I hope you've enjoyed the Dante's Drive-In Halloween special this year. I kind of just threw this set together, but it ended up working. You know, it's green. So, there's that. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say except stick around because really, really cool stuff is right around the corner. I promise.